Okay, so this is how doing the wings. So first of all, of course, we're going to get a knot. This is how I start my knots. It doesn't really matter how you do your knot. Just get a knot done into the yarn. So knot. And then we're going to chain 3 from our hook. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now from there, we're going to loop back over to the first stitch or chain that we did. Put our hook in. I'm going to pull this a little bit tighter. We want to keep the yarn fairly tight, not super tight, not so tight that it's hard to work, but we want to keep it fairly tight around the hook so that the stitches are nice and tight. So I'm going to do a stitch in that last stitch, or the first stitch that we did. Okay, so now it is very hard to see right when you begin, but we are going this direction, so from right to left, and we're going to go in the very first stitch. We're going to do 2 stitches in the same spot. This tail is getting in my way. Okay, so 2 stitches in the same spot. Whoa, or not. Try that again. This tail absolutely refuses to get out of my way. Okay, and now we're going to do 2 stitches in the same stitch. Okay, so there's 1, and then in the same exact stitch, again, it's hard to see right when we begin, we're going to do another stitch. Okay, and then the next stitch over, we're going to do 2 stitches. Whoopsie. So here's 1, and here's 2. Again, in the same spot. And again, we want to keep the yarn kind of, not super tight, but just tight enough. Okay, so in the next stitch over, one more time, we're going to do 2 stitches in the same stitch. It always is a struggle on the first round that you do. It's always a pain. Okay, so there's 1 stitch, and there's 2 stitches. Okay, so now you can see that it's actually starting to kind of curl in on itself, which is completely normal. That's fine. Doesn't really matter. So now we actually, if you were to count all of these stitches around, you should have 6 stitches, but they are very hard to see, so it's kind of hard to count at this point. But we're going to go into the next stitch, and see, it's already easier to get into the next stitch. And we're going to do 1 stitch. See, right there. And then from here, next stitch over, we're going to go and do 2 stitches in the same spot. Okay, so now we're going to do our first half double. So in the next stitch over, we're going to yarn over, go into the stitch, pull up so we have 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through those 3 loops. Then we're going to crochet 1 up, or chain 1 up, just straight up, and then we're going to do another half double. And you can see if I pull on this stitch, it creates a little tiny gap right there. That's where I just did my half double. That's where I'm going to put the next half double, in the same spot. So yarn over, put your hook in the same spot, pull up the 3 loops, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. So what you have is you have a half double, a single stitch, and then a half double. And what you want to do is put your stitch marker right there in the middle where the single stitch is, right there. It's a little tiny bit of a gap, so it should be fairly easy to see if my camera will focus. So put your stitch marker right there. And then we can continue on. In the next stitch, we want to put 2 stitches. Okay. And the next stitch, we want to put 1 stitch. In the next stitch, oh no. Okay, next stitch over, we want to put 1 stitch. And in the last stitch, we want to put 1 stitch. Okay, so that would technically be, again, 9 stitches all the way around, but we're not going to count them because they're kind of hard to see with the white. So now we're going to go 1 stitch into the next stitch. I'm going to put 1 stitch. And what I suggest that you do is pause this video as you go around each round and just make sure that that yours looks kind of the same as mine. So like mine right now kind of looks like a tiny egg. So look like that. Now, in the next stitch, do 1 stitch. And again, pause the video if you need to. So after we do that 1 stitch, we're going to come over to the next stitch and do 2 stitches. Okay. In the next stitch, we're going to do 1 stitch. And in the next stitch, we're going to do 1 stitch. So what we've done so far in this row, oh my gosh, is 5 stitches. Oh my goodness. Okay. And we have come back to our stitch marker. So this stitch that we're about to do is going to be our 6th stitch. So right where our stitch marker is, you don't want to remove it, but right there in the hole that it's in, you want to do a half double. So yarn over, put the hook in, pull up 3 loops, and then yarn over and pull through those 3 loops. Make sure you pause when you need to, because then we're going to chain 1 straight up, and then in the same hole where the stitch marker is, we're going to do another double. So yarn over, crochet in the hole, or hook in the hole I mean, pull up 3 loops, yarn over, pull through those 3 loops. So all of that is done in the same hole. So you can see that the hole is getting a little bit bigger now. So what I can do now is take out my stitch marker and where there is a gap right here, see, right here, between these 2 stitches, where I did that single crochet, that's where I'm going to put my stitch marker again. Okay, so all of that counted as our 6th stitch. Okay, so after we do that, next stitch over, we're going to do 1 stitch. So there's 7 stitches. Next stitch over, we're going to do 2 stitches in the same stitch. So there's 8 and 9. Next stitch over, 1. So we'll do, that's the 10th stitch. The next stitch over, we'll do 1 stitch. So that's the 11th stitch. And the next stitch over, 1 stitch. So that's the 12th stitch. So all the way around, it's going to be 12 stitches like this. And it's looking a little bit more like a wing. Still kind of looks like an egg, but it's looking a little bit more like a wing. So now, next stitch over, 1 stitch. Next stitch over, 2 stitches in the same stitch. Next stitch over, 1 stitch. Next stitch over, 1 stitch. Next stitch over, 1 stitch. So there are 3 single stitches in a row. Okay, and then the next stitch over, which should be the one right next to where our stitch marker is it's going to be 2 stitches in the same stitch. Okay, so now we are back to where our stitch marker is supposed to be. So now we are going to do just a half double in that spot, just one. So let me go back so I can show it. All right, so just in where the stitch marker is, right in that hole, we're going to yarn over, go in the hole, pull up 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, and pull through those 3 loops. Okay, so now after we've done that half double, we can move the stitch marker right to there, right where we just put that stitch. Okay. And in the next stitch, do 1 stitch. Whoopsie, maybe. There we go. Next stitch, do 1 stitch. Oh my gosh. Mine doesn't want to do it. There we go. Okay. Next stitch, do 1 stitch. Next stitch, do 2 stitches. Next stitch, do 1 stitch. Next stitch, do 1 stitch. Next stitch, do 2 stitches in the same stitch. And the next stitch, do 1 stitch. And we should be, you see what's happening is when we stop, we are right above on the opposite side where our stitch marker is. So now this last row is the easy one, quote unquote, is the easy one, because we're going to do 1 stitch in every stitch all the way around until we get to our stitch marker. So just do 1 stitch, next one over, 1 stitch, all the way until you get to your marker. Sometimes the marker kind of gets in the way. Okay, and so you can see it's kind of like folding in on itself, and that's actually perfectly fine. If I can show my other bee, or my other wing, that's what it was doing, was folding in on itself. And that's what kind of gives it that like curved, smooth wing look. And you can see, let me pull up my loop so I don't lose it, that they are about the same size. Okay, so now, oh, my light is changing. Oh no. But so it's almost about the same size, but it is a little bit smaller, and that's because we still have to finish. So, let me pull this back onto my hook. So, right where this stitch marker is, we're going to do our final half double. So, I'm going to, going to yarn over, get my hook in where my stitch marker is, and then pull up the 3 loops, and then yarn through, yarn through all 3 of those loops. Now we can just take the stitch marker out, just completely, because we don't need it anymore. Crap. Mine is going to be a pain. Come on. There we go. Okay, take the stitch marker out. We don't need it anymore. So now what we're going to do is do 1 more crochet, or 1 more stitch right next to where we just did that half double. So now let me pull this all the way out. And sometimes if yours is a little bit too tight, you have to kind of pull it to get it to be the size that it's supposed to be. And now if I put it up next to the wing that I just made, you can see that they are about the same size. Put it like this. There you go. See? And once it is attached to the bee, it will be the same size. So now, right after doing that single crochet, we're going to tie it off. So what I'm going to do is put my loop back onto my hook. I'm going to cut, make sure that there's a long tail, and I'm going to cut it. Then I'm going to feed it through the loop right here so I can